Hey, what's going on, everybody? A little bit of an off-topic video today. So, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, every presidential election since around the turn of the millennium, like 2000 and after, there seems to have been protests every election. And I think it's gotten worse after Bush Jr. left, because in 2008, which was Bush's last year, we had Occupy. You remember Occupy Wall Street, Occupy the toilet, Occupy Subway, whatever. And 2012, there was kind of an Occupy, but not really. But then 2016, we saw Antifa rise. In 2020, it was the BLM, and now this year, it's the Free Palestine movement. And this is a model of Marxism, okay? When Mao Zedong and Stalin and a lot of these people took power, what they did was mobilize the college students because they were easier to indoctrinate in the college environment because they were protected within the walls of the college. And, the people on the outside, all of us who, work and see the world for what it is, have very different views. And that's basically, in a nutshell, how a lot of the Marxist movements have started, was actually in the universities. Even the French Revolution in the 1930s, there was a large movement for communism in 20s and 30s in the UK, the US, and France. And this is around the same time that Lenin had taken power in the Soviet Union, which was after World War I. There were communist movements everywhere, and the principle was the same: either mobilize the workers, and if you couldn't mobilize the workers, you mobilize the college kids. But the whole idea was to create a society of grievance. And America's unique because of the Electoral College, because of the way our government is structured. A true democracy would very quickly become the United States of Los Angeles and New York, because the two big cities would basically overrule everyone else. And we don't have that, because every state has so many voices based on population size and density, which actually makes me wonder if this unfettered immigration with a lot of people going to a lot of certain states isn't meant to puff up the roll numbers to get more electoral votes in the future. There's a lot of speculation there. Unfortunately, a lot of the Cuban and Venezuelan immigrants, many are criminals, but a lot of them are very anti-communist. So they're getting a bit of a mixed bag, because a lot of the guys I'm seeing here in my part of Texas are very upset that, well, you let us in because we fled communism, but why'd you let this guy in? Because he's a cartel guy. And they see it. The new immigrants get it. I've actually had a new arrival who's in the process of getting his green card actually tell me, wow, in America I can own a gun, right? I said, yeah. And I said, it's best to get a license and get school if you have no experience. He said, they have schools? I said, yeah, you go to the shooting range and you sign, you pay $30, whatever the hell it is, and they teach you, and then they show you, and then he said, I can get a license. I said, yeah, you can get a license, and you have to have your driver's license, you have to have your green card. And he goes, oh, because, the world is dangerous, so I can protect my home. I said, yeah. I mean, don't go shoot people in the street. He goes, no. And he was fascinated. He's like, this is great. And then he turns around and says, this is one of my Uber drivers, right? Because they're all like Cuban where I am. And he's like, in Cuba, they took the guns, and then when the journalists didn't obey, they arrested all the journalists, and nobody could stop them. He gets it. Ding, 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 ding. This guy wins. So I'm super excited for a lot of the immigrants, because as I meet them on a one-on-one basis, there's some I'm like, oh, no, you need to be put away or sent somewhere else. But there are a lot of them I'm like, oh, I like you guys. But anyway, going back to the protests, and they're protesting their riots about immigration in New York, their arguments and protests. And now we have the Free Palestine movement. And Columbia University didn't know what to do. They were trying to negotiate. And I guess they thought, oh, we're at Columbia, we're an Ivy League school, we're going to do the right thing. And they didn't. They tried to negotiate, and the protesters wouldn't disband, and they wouldn't explain what their objective was. And the university's like, well, do you want to have a forum? Do you want to have certain speakers? Like, what's the end game? And they couldn't answer the college. But instead of kicking them off campus, they prevented the police from intervening. And then they said, okay, all the Jewish students need to work remote. So, of course, the Republicans immediately protested that. But then 30 Democratic House of Representatives members, 30 of them, 25 to 30 of them, wrote a letter to the board of directors of Columbia and said, not only do we agree with the Republicans, you have created a discriminatory environment because you've the Jewish students or the pro-Israeli students, even if they're not Jewish, are afraid to go out. The general student populace is afraid to go out. By your own admission, some of the people who have been arrested are not even students. So now the college has been compromised as far as safety. So not only is this an unsafe environment, but you have created a segregated environment to Jewish students in particular. And that's illegal. You're violating their civil rights, and you're a breach of contract for their tuition. Mind blown. These Democratic representatives, along with many of the Republicans on the East Coast, said, you're violating their civil rights. You can't do this. And basically the university, they said, you're in violation of, I think it's Title VI university funding. And indirectly what that means is if you don't fix this and obey the correct rules, because civil rights goes in both directions, right? It's not just, oh, this minority over here, it's everybody. You're discriminating against certain students who are not aligned with the protests, and you've allowed the protests to disrupt everyone's experience, and now you have strangers on campus, so now it's unsafe. You violated a bunch of rules. The implication is we're going to pull your funding. Now, Columbia has already lost millions, like tens of millions of dollars, because donors are like, look, I get it, a peaceful protest, they have the right, that's Columbia, but this is bullshit. This is not acceptable. You're not rebelling against government or against the senators. You're discriminating against other students who are gainfully there. That was new. And I'm actually impressed. Now, to be fair, the Democratic representatives who led this were an Italian, an Irishman, a Jewish guy, and a African-American members of New York and New Jersey. They were like, their constituents lit up their phones and emailed and just bombarded them, and then they started really paying attention and went, no, this is bullshit. You know who was absent from the New York group who were for disbanding the unlawful protests and forcing obeying of the rules was AOC, who I think is a little Marxist shit, and I have no use for that girl. But I applaud them. But what this has done is create a big rift in politics on that side. This election's gonna be weird, y'all. Like, a lot of us are like, oh, they're gonna throw Trump in jail, and if they throw Trump in jail, I'm sure somebody's in the wings to jump in. It might be Tulsi, it might be well, Tulsi is technically an independent, but it might be DeSantis. Somebody might jump in, right? If Biden gets sick, right? They got that meathead in California might jump in, right? We don't know. We have no idea. I think this whole election is going to be one big freaking, like, October surprise, but it'll be the whole freaking election. Like, the whole thing's going to be a shit show. But that's interesting. That is actually Congress people doing their job and not only protesting about someone else not doing the right thing, They used the laws that were on the books and said, you are violating civil rights. And yes, civil rights goes both ways. Good for them. That's what we need more of. We need more of these folks in Congress collaborating. Now, obviously, to you and I, unless you have a student at Columbia or one of these universities, this doesn't affect us directly as far as the protests, but I do believe these protests will get worse as we get closer to the election. Also, with Israel pending an invasion of Rafah, which is the southern part of Gaza, it can get very ugly very fast, and emotions will run high. And with the unfettered immigration and the unconfirmed entries, we could have bad players here. I'm convinced we do, but either they, A, have decided to get drunk and happy and decided not to be terrorists, or B, they're waiting for the instructions to go forth and create mayhem. So these are the kind of things when you're on the road, when you're traveling, when you're visiting family, you need to be aware of. And something important that we don't touch on is your college kids. Whether they're your kids, your nieces, nephews, your friends' kids, your goddaughters, whatever. Teach the college kids, teach the young adults who are getting that first job, first apartment, whether they're in college or not, hey, have a get-home bag. Have a weekend's worth of food. Maybe not 2 weeks. You're living in a dorm or an apartment. You can only hide so much food. Especially you had roommates like mine. They were potheads. He'd get stoned and eat everything in the room. He'd buy it back the next day when he sobered up, but he ate everything that night. God, that was the most stoned fucker ever. Anyway, hell of an architect too. I guess that was his muse, right? He'd get stoned and create awesome buildings. Point being, teach them to be ready for 24, 48, 72 hours. Don't give them a heart attack. Just say, hey, look, blackouts happen. Hey, what if there's a protest in your campus again and you can't go to the store because you don't want to be in the street and there's fighting and shit? Teach them. That's on us to teach. Now, if they don't want to learn, that's on them. But you'll be shocked. The more I reach out to young adults, the more I'm seeing the little lights go on, and they're going on faster, especially as they start hitting that early 20s and they start having their own kids, getting their own jobs. They pay for that first car, and they're like, I don't want someone to break my car. That's bullshit. I worked for that. Gen Z is not stupid, but Gen Z has gotten misled, and we can undo that misleading by just going in and being disruptive as shit. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Now, I may be rejected by a lot of these young ones. But anyway, one, applause to the Congress people who actually did their job, not only going against what's not necessary, unlawful protests, but using the law to make everyone aware there will be a consequence financially or otherwise to the institutions allowing the bullshit. And two, we need to educate the college kids, the young adults, the young parents, the young families who are just now getting started. Economics is awful right now. We can help with our experience and our mistakes, teach them, right? Society's trying to pull apart communities and pull apart families and pull apart friends and force us all onto social media to make their click dollars. Fuck their click dollars. Reach out to them. Call them, email them, however you do it. Reach out to people. And yeah, be frosty. And remember, pay attention if you're traveling from city A to city B. When you go to a new location, you may want to know what the hell's going on before you get there. You don't want to drive into a protest unprepared. In any case, folks, that's it for this week's rant. God bless, Godspeed. I will see you all on the next video. And I'm going to finish my paperwork, and I got to get some rest because I'm still tired from that last trip. You guys be good.